the recent decision by the U.S. government to impose sanctions on certain Ethiopian government officials because of the ongoing crisis in Tigray has continued to generate comments. So some analysts believe the measures are narrow and targeted at the moment, but it highlights the plight of Tigray and the ongoing political and security tensions in Ethiopia. Let's hear from Matt Kiniga, Associate Practice Lead Sub-Saharan Africa at Frontier View in London. Hello, Matt. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for having me on the show today.
So how will the U.S. sanctions affect the investment climate in Ethiopia?
Yes, so it's a good question to ask. So certainly the sanctions do send a strong message to the Ethiopian authorities. However, in our view, we think the sanctions or the impact of the sanctions will likely be very limited in terms of investor sentiment and the investor climate at the moment in Ethiopia. And this is because, as you mentioned during your introduction, that the sanctions are very targeted on specific individuals in government. There are no financial or broader sanctions or broader economic sanctions in place yet. These are the ones that would have the material impact on investor sentiment and the economic outlook for the country. So generally, we do see investors still viewing Ethiopia very favorably, despite these targeted sanctions by the US government. And this is because the country has quite a strong growth rate. The government is continuing to open up the economy, liberalize sectors of the economy. The Safaricom-led bid that was successful in bidding for the country's first private mobile phone network a couple of weeks ago is a very good example of this. So there is substantial investor appetite in Ethiopia. If, however, sanctions do tighten or the conflict in the Tigray region does worsen, then we could see a bit of a weakening of investor sentiment and the investor climate more broadly.
So do you think the conflict in the Tigray region threatens Ethiopia's economic outlook?
I mean, even with the Tigray conflict, we are expecting the economy to grow by about 4 or 5% this year and about 6% next year. So these are very, strong growth rates by sub-Saharan African standards. However, I would say we have downgraded our view for the growth outlook for Ethiopia compared to our previous forecasts. And it also, the growth outlook for 2021 and 2022 represents quite a substantial slowdown compared to the sort of 9 or 10% annual growth that Ethiopia was registering before COVID. So part of the reason that we are forecasting slower growth is because of the Tigray conflict. It's kind of it has an indirect impact on the economic outlook. And this is because the government will be forced to divert more resources towards the armed forces, which means that government finances, which are already under pressure, will feel more strain. And we could see a slowdown in investment in infrastructure, for example. And we could also see a slowdown or a weakening of agriculture production, especially in the north of the country. And it's also worth noting that the country is struggling with annual inflation of about 20%, as well as pretty severe difficulties with foreign currency access, especially for the private sector. These issues are not directly related to the currency and inflation issues are not directly related to the Tigray conflict, but we do expect the conflict to probably aggravate them over the coming year or so.
So what risks will businesses face during the general election that is planned later this month?
This is a really interesting sort of topic at the moment. A lot of our clients are asking us what is going to be happening, or what should they be looking out for over the next month or so, as the election is due to be held at the end of June. So very broadly, we do see the elections later on this year as a potential flashpoint for protests and civil unrest, especially in rural areas of the country where ethnic nationalist sentiment is the strongest. And we certainly can't rule out the emergence of new ethnic political fronts or armed ethnic political fronts along the lines of the Tigray People's Liberation Front in different parts of the country. And so this certainly does present quite a significant risk of, new conflicts emerging beyond the Tigray region. So we would say very broadly, companies should anticipate a bit of a weakening of investor sentiment in the very short term, a bit of a softening of customer demand, business conditions in the very short term. But our base case view is that it probably won't fundamentally derail the growth outlook this year. and Addis Ababa and the main transport corridor to Djibouti probably will be mostly unaffected by the worst of any political violence or unrest. And so most businesses operating in urban areas probably won't be directly affected for the foreseeable future, even if there is some post-election unrest.
All right, let's just hope for the best. Thank you very much, Matt, for your time. We do appreciate it.
My pleasure.